we're not meant to be in summer all the time. We're meant to have rest. We're meant to have fallow. We're meant to have winter. We're meant to have the buds of spring. And when we live more in connection to that, we're in connection to our feminine nature. We're also in greater connection to nature as an energy, which is the life-sustaining energy of creation. Even the cycles of creation, we're not in one aspect of it all the time. We go through the spiral or the cycle. We only have to look at a pregnant woman to see that. Like, she's not pregnant. She conceives. She gets the seed. She grows the seed. She blooms, she blooms, she blooms. Then she releases, she lets go, she births, and then she rests and restores. And that is the ultimate cycle of creation, to create life, right? And so if we see that manifestation, it's not full bloom all of the time. There is a cycle that happens there. And that is the piece that I guide women back into connection with, or to remember.
Hey, my name is Olivia D'Souza. I'm dedicated to helping multi-passionate entrepreneurs turn their dreams into reality by building a career and a life they love and making a positive impact in the world. I'm a podcast and social media manager, a singer-songwriter, a kids music creator, a fadishta, a wife and a mum. I'm the secret weapon behind many 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs, helping them shine a light and call in the people they are here to serve. And now I'm here to help you. This podcast is here to help you learn and be inspired. You'll learn about podcasting, lead generation, business, and all about the real life stories of people behind the businesses just like you. Think of it as a place to hang out with your like-minded business bestie who gets what it's like. So grab a cuppa and hit subscribe so we can hang out again. This is Magnetic Pod, the podcast.
I am here and I'm ready to be brave. Cannot miss me, I'll stand on every stage. I'm available for my destiny to reach my people. Gonna be a star, so if you pass.
Hey friend, before we dive into today's episode, remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of the tips we share in Magnetic Pod on podcasting, lead generation, and business boosting ideas. And remember, if you have or you're thinking about starting a podcast, head over to my website at livymusicmedia.com/freebies. I have loads and loads of free resources and templates that will help you get started. The link is in my show notes. Now, here's your show. Hello, Rebecca. Welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Liv. It's so good to be together.
It is. It's been a while since we've had a face-to-face chat, even if it is over the internet.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will introduce you. So Rebecca Wilson is a client of mine. I help her with her podcast, and she is a feminine embodiment coach. She supports and guides women to awaken the creative power and potency of their womb spaces to birth their visions, purpose, creations, art, business, relationships, and life from an awakened, rooted, and grounded feminine energy. Her offerings carry a potent alchemical energy that support women to transform their limitations into awakened expression. She guides women back into connection with their bodies and alignment with their feminine energy, inner truth, wisdom, pleasure, and creative power. I'd love to learn more about that, Rebecca. It's so fascinating to me. So can you explain a bit about what all this means? What is embodiment to you?
So embodiment for me is living life or experiencing life through the felt sense of our body. So rather than experiencing life through thought or the mind, it's a piece of being attuned to those subtle currents of energy and emotion and expression in connection to the body, and deeper than that, in connection to self. So whatever we are experiencing in life, or whatever relational experience we're having, whether it's with nature or another human, we are connected to ourselves, and through that connected to another.
So with the work you do, I gather you believe in spirituality. Would that be fair to say? It sounds like it has that component. And so if we so that's just fascinating to me. If that's where you're coming from, and you're saying to be connected to the body. What role does the body play in that? Is it a way of connecting to that guidance and to that wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Well, I think I do anyway. It's a really interesting piece because a lot of spiritual teachings and spiritual texts have historically been about transcending the body, leaving the body to go to different planes of existence or to the holy God that exists outside of bodily form, or whatever teaching or text or spiritual experience that's often spoken about. And even in yoga, there was such an emphasis for such a long time to transcend the human form of the body and to transcend the physical into this otherworldly, out of body experience. And I definitely took that journey. Actually, that was a big part of my journey and my awakening. But I realized that nothing was out there apart from a felt sense of disconnection and disassociation. Like I wasn't present or truly here in this reality and everything that it has to offer me. So I began to explore, how do I bring that which I've been just conditioned to search for outside of myself? How do I begin that journey of searching for that inside of myself? And for me, it was like the universe, and I use God in a more spacious tone, but that godly like spirit or that energy of the divine that we've so conditioned to pray to outside of the self. I began to explore, well, this must live inside me too, because if the micro and the macro are just reflections of each other, then everything that exists out there exists in here. And this is where the journey of awakening through the body began to unravel for me. And the deepest spiritual pilgrimage that I found was to explore the inner world of my own body and my own being, all of my own patterns, my beliefs, my limitations, the things that have been passed down through my family system, the imprints that I've adopted from culture, from society, what I should and shouldn't be, and do this, don't do that. And it was all like in here. And it's been a journey of unraveling that to truly find what is my truth, what is the authentic self that is here in me. For me, that's the deepest spiritual experience that I have found.
And can you tell me a bit more about how you took that journey, how that unfolded for you?
Well, like most people that I speak to, when they have these kind of pivotal experiences in life brought me some challenge. I experienced some trauma within my family, and it just opened a real opportunity for me to ask lots of really big questions. And I often find that the women that I work with and the people that are in my community, they've had their own experience, whatever that may be, something that has shaken them or guided them to ask questions, to unravel the status quo of how it's just been. Life just has been happening, and then all of a sudden something happens. And for some people, it isn't necessarily a huge trauma. A lot of women that I work with, this happens when they've had a child and they're like, I'm never going to be the same person again. Like, wow, life is completely different now. Who am I? What do I like? What don't I like? And there's this awakening that can happen. And it can also happen, and that's a beautiful thing, right? To bring a life into the world. And it can also happen in these times of challenge. And that was it for me, really. Certain things that had happened within my family and my younger sister being unwell. And it just led me to ask questions, most of all about the system. First of all, why do we trust doctors? Why did I just hand over sovereignty or authority to this? And then as you begin to ask questions, they just become never ending. So that was really the opening point for me, the beginning point. And that led to what I would speak into or share, quite a profound, energetic and spiritual awakening that happened for me in quite a short period of time. I was transforming on a very deep level. And yeah, here I am.
I'm really fascinated about the feminine energy and the masculine and feminine and how that all works. And you talk about womb spaces. Could you talk a bit more on that?
Well, we've been living in a very masculine energy within the planet, within consciousness, within culture for some time. We've been in a patriarchal energetic. Previous to that, we were in a matriarchal energy on the planet. So it always seems to shift and transfer. I do believe that we're going to move more into a unified space at some point in time. I don't know when, but we're going through that alchemical shift at this moment in time. But the feminine energy is just something that's been disregarded and disconnected from for some time, really. and more so for women to be disconnected from it through many different things. Like women can do it all now, which is wonderful that we have power and we have liberation and we can have our own bank and we can have our own work. But this unbelievable pressure then came for women to be everything, to be both the career, to be both driving force of go get it kind of attitude, and to still mother and to nurture. And to do all of that, we've disconnected from our nature and moved into more of a masculine driven energy. You know, feminism actually has quite a masculine quality to it, or it has had in previous years. And it's brought women into this experience or this energy of coming up and out of the body and just existing more from the mind than from their center, which is actually like our womb space is our intuitive center. That is the feminine brain. That's where we are deeply connected to our family members, to our children, to our community. And we have these seasons and these cycles that we've just been told or conditioned to not honor and respect. And I speak of that as our menstrual cycle. We go through on a very scientific level, we go through 4 massive shifts in hormones within a cycle. We have 4 different expressions, many more different expressions of ourselves, but there's these 4 pivotal expressions of our hormonal status throughout a cycle. But yet we're living in a world that wants us to just be in this, put the foot on the pedal, press the gas down and go. And that's like great ovulation energy, right? But we don't have that all month. So women were getting more and more burnt out and tired and exhausted because they were trying to put the foot on the gas. And our cycle and our nature isn't that. We are meant to ebb and flow and move into more quietness and into reflection when we're bleeding, and then come back out into the spring and the summer again. But there's just been all of this wisdom lost and forgotten. So many women were not even connected to that. And still now many women are not. And so that's the work that I support women in, reconnecting to that feminine energy within themselves, which isn't linear. It's very cyclical. It moves, it flows, it changes. And that's the power. That's the wisdom of the feminine. But because the world and our culture has been so imprinted that like power and wisdom is one track line into success, we've lost the ability to recognize other expressions of creativity, of abundance, of success, of power, of wisdom. And it's not about the linear aspect being wrong, but just being overexpressed. And we've lost both and ability to see that there's power in both. There's wisdom in both. There's beauty in both. And we've lived in this straight line trajectory to success and whatever that is at the end of that. And if you're anything but in that, then you're not a successful human, or you're not doing enough, or you're not doing it right. And the journey of awakening or coming back into that feminine connection is to just remember that like nature moves in cycles. It's a famous saying, nature doesn't bloom all year round. We're not meant to be in summer all the time. We're meant to have rest. We're meant to have fallow. We're meant to have winter. We're meant to have the buds of spring. And when we live more in connection to that, we're in connection to our feminine nature. We're also in greater connection to nature as an energy, which is the life-sustaining energy of creation. Even the cycles of creation, we're not in one aspect of it all the time. We go through the spiral or the cycle. We only have to look at a pregnant woman to see that. Like, she's not pregnant. She conceives, she gets the seed, she grows the seed, she blooms, she blooms, she blooms. Then she releases, she lets go, she births, and then she rests and restores. And that is the ultimate cycle of creation, to create life, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we see that manifestation, it's not full bloom all of the time. There is a cycle that happens there. And that is the piece that I guide women to back into connection with, or to remember. I'm not teaching them anything new. Their bodies know it. There's always like, oh, wow, forgot about this. Like the body has a deep exhale.
So what might that look like in terms of how women live their life, or if they've got a business? You deal with a lot of businesses. Does that mean there's like a whole different approach, or it's physically that they do anything differently, but just a shift that happens? How would that translate into how they now choose to approach life and business and any other thing that they want to birth into the world?
Well, the most simple way to transfer that teaching into business is to work within your business in alignment and attuned to your own menstrual cycle. So you plan those big bursts of get the to-do list done in ovulation, which just makes sense. And then when you want to be more dreamy and think about ideas and maybe journal and map visions out, that might be more like when you're menstruating, because we're much more in that kind of fluid energy then. When we are in our autumn, which is premenstrual energy, that would be the time we can get quite critical, but that's a great energy. Like what's working, what's not working, what needs to go, what needs to stop, what needs to stay. And then again, when we come into that just before ovulation, we're in a spring-like energy. We're just feeling into the potential and the possibility, maybe making those calls, building some connections. Would you like to do a podcast with me next week? Because you'll be in your summer and you'll be in bloom. And so we can connect how we work in our business to our cycle. The 2 weeks of my cycle that I have more energy, I'll have more availability for client calls because I'm there and present. And when it comes to the mad bleed, it's like sometimes I can't even get words out on my first day. So that would not be the time that I would schedule to record podcasts, or wouldn't be the time that I would schedule to have meetings or to do this with you, because it would just be, no, keep on stumbling over my words. I don't even know what I was talking about. Forgot, because the brain just is like a little bit like mush for a few days. And so it should be, but that might be when I like dream up or vision, like, ooh, what would be a great idea for that? And I build it all there. And then when I've got that full energy and I'm full of the chat and I'm like, yep, all the energy's here, then I create it. So that's one of the most easeful ways, because you can just connect to your own cycle and work in your business and in your creation cycles like that. And then also just checking in for women. It's really simple. Body first, business second. We're so taught to, I'll just give myself away to this. And then there's burnout, and then there's frustration, and then there's resentment. And it's like, how is my body feeling right now? Am I resourced enough to take that phone call? Am I resourced enough to take on a new client? Do I have the space and capacity to say yes to that interview? Listening to body first, and then making decisions from that place, rather than making decisions and overriding how you feel, which is just going to create more disconnect and disharmony in the relationship you have with your body, which is ultimately yourself.
That's beautiful. It's a lot about really knowing yourself really well and honoring, like you gave the example of actually giving birth, that every stage has a powerful and meaningful purpose. So instead of thinking you have to force things, imagine if we had to think our way through creating a baby. We couldn't do it. It's listening, it's honouring the process. I've also heard you say in your podcast about regulating your nervous system, and when I listen to that, I think, oh my goodness, and you mentioned a lot of people come to you when they become mothers too, and I thought, a lot of what you say is actually really helpful to all aspects of life and to motherhood, because I know as a mother, if your kid's pushing back against what you need to get done, that you need them to dress, go to school, do homework, whatever it might be, and there's that pushback, or there might be a meltdown or whatever, that you need to co-regulate, you need to have your nervous system regulated. Can you speak a bit about the nervous system regulation, how to get back on track with those?
First of all, the piece that I always like to share is it is not about staying regulated all the time. That is a perfectionist mentality that a lot of people come to me like, how do I stay regulated and chill all of the time? And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, that ain't going to happen because life happens. Life is dysregulating at times. And we often speak of dysregulation in only a negative way, like, oh, I'm stressed or I'm anxious. But actually, when we're in hyper states of arousal or joy or excitement, we're also dysregulated, but we don't think about that too much because they're more pleasant or positive expressions of energy. Regulation is that neutral space where we feel grounded and present with ourselves, and there's a spaciousness around our ability to make decisions from a place of responding rather than reacting. That is how I would describe regulation. And like I say, the journey is not to stay there all the time. In fact, if a person claims to be in that state all of the time, they're probably in a dysregulated state of fawn and almost like playing dead or like flatlining a little bit. The work lives in recognizing when we have been activated or triggered or whatever word we've moved from regulation to dysregulation, acknowledging that that is what is alive in the body, having some kind of practice, and everyone will have their own preferred practice. Like for me, it's just like having my hands someplace on my body and just taking a few deep breaths in and out, extending the exhale just to create some space between me and the thing that's triggered me. Maybe, a family member, or I don't know, a driver that cuts you up on the road, or your child, or somebody in business. If you can just allow yourself those few moments of breath or spaciousness, it's enough space for us to respond rather than react. And that's how we go from regulation, dysregulation because something happened, back into regulation again. And of course, all of that sounds super easy when you just speak it out loud. And the practice of it is just that. And sometimes we're going to get it and we'll be like, yep, great. I came back. I found myself. And other times we're going to be bang in the middle of a huge reaction and be like, oh, this is not the one. I've shouted at the kids 10 times in a row, or I've had a go at my partner, or I've put the phone down on my mum, whatever the thing is. But even that is wisdom, just acknowledging like, yeah, so what was it about that situation that activated me, that touched something in me, that caused me to dysregulate? And it's usually always something that your body remembers from a previous experience, mostly in our formative years, in our childhood, or times where we felt traumatized or scared or worried. And that experience brings that up again. But even if that is the case, it's recognizing, well, what did I need in that moment? If we're in a place of reflection, what did I need in that moment to create some space? What could I have done in that moment to be able to be responsive rather than reactive? And then just be like, okay, so the next time I feel that feeling, I will try to or aim to give that to myself. So it might look like taking a few deep breaths. It might look like shaking the body. It might look like letting out a sound or a sigh. If it's a bigger experience, and obviously trusting that if you've got little people to look after, you can't really just like go for a walk on your own, but taking time to go out into nature, have a walk it out, stretch it out. And that might not be instantly, but when the children are at school or they're in the care of somebody else, you can go and give that to yourself just to begin to regulate again. And it's just finding those practices that we'll all have ones that our body connects more to than others. You can also voice to children or to your partner or your friend or whoever, I'm feeling a little anxious right now, or I'm feeling a little dysregulated right now. And even just saying that rather than saying the thing that the reaction would want to say gives enough space for the reaction to dissolve and the response to come forward. I'm feeling really activated by what you've shared or what we're talking about here. I need to take 5 minutes for myself. I will be back. And of course, if it's a little human, it's slightly different because you're in charge of looking after them. But if it's in an adult relationship, then you can go and take yourself away, take your 5 breaths. Or you might just step out of confinement of the closeness of the interaction, go out and stand by a tree or put your feet on the earth, few breaths, shake it off, just like an animal would, and then arrive back into the situation responsive, open and curious, rather than reactive, closed, shut down, trying to prove the other person wrong so that you can prove yourself right. And we just get in these cycles, don't we?
Those ego traps.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the...
You are wrong. I am right. I need to make sure I'm right so my ego stays happy. So I'm going to find every possible outcome for you being the one that's wrong. And then they're doing the same thing. And before you know it, we're in this crazy egoic dance nobody even knows what they're talking about anymore. And there's just dysregulation after dysregulation.
Mm-hmm. And it is
when we honor what is there for us, like even saying, I feel dysregulated right now. I feel anxious right now. I feel like I'm going to leave my body right now. I feel a bit dizzy right now. We're speaking out the experience rather than going into the reaction. And that gives us enough space to recognize, I need to sit down. I need a glass of water. I need a sweet cup of warm tea. I need to take a few breaths. And sometimes you need more space. Like I need a day away from you. I don't know if you have a challenge, if you've got like family members that you've got those challenges with. I need to take a day and I will be back in touch. It's a bigger scenario. And it's really honoring the self ultimately so that we can be responsible for taking care of our own nervous systems in all of our relationships, our relationship to life, to other people, to children, to family members, to clients, to team members. And all we need to do is be responsible for our own nervous system. And then the other person can be responsible for theirs. And that's where we can then begin to co-regulate. That is slightly different with children because, of course, they haven't learned the skills, the tools, and don't have the capacity to regulate their own nervous systems, which is why there's a meltdown and there's tantrums and there's drama. And rightfully so, because they're learning about being a human. And parenting for me is like a journey of let me find a regulated or resourced place in me to be able to honor and witness the child's experience. And usually it passes much quicker than if we've got into it. Like if there's like a reaction upon a reaction, the beauty of children and when we've all been children is something comes alive really quick, but it can also pass through really quick. Like how many times has one of your children been like full on meltdown and then 10 minutes later, they're like singing and dancing and the happiest version of themselves. And you're like, wow, that is crazy wild. But it's just like, it's passed through now and I'd like to play with my dolls again. And it's like,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
They teach us a lot.
Yeah, they do.
Now, one thing you talk about helping women with that I know that you do really, really well is storytelling. Like, I like to put people at ease if they want to do a podcast, for example, that I will edit out mistakes of their outtakes and all of that, and they don't have to get it perfect. But I'm amazed how little that needs doing with you and how you just let it flow through you somehow. So can you tell us a bit about storytelling and your approach to it?
Thank you. I just allow myself to speak and don't really get in the way. I guess there's an ego in all of us that wants to know, is it perfect? Is it right? Have I said it right? I've written the script and I need to read it word for word. And I just don't do any of that. I just turn the microphone on. I sit, meditate, connect to my body and just speak. So
do you have any dot points or anything?
No.
Or you just, wow.
No. I usually write content from the podcast. So we'll either transcribe them or you transcribe them sometimes, or one of my other VAs will transcribe them. And then we'll pull out the text to make the emails and make blogs from it. I don't have anything written out beforehand. I'll have the theme of this. So the title ultimately will come to me, like business and the nervous system. And I'll be like, okay, let's go. And then it's just there for me. But that it's been a big journey of me anchoring into my body and my wisdom and being in trust and just allowing things to flow and not getting in the way, to the point where I have never listened to anything that I've recorded, which is why I'm always messaging you saying, how's the recording? Because I don't listen to it. I've got hundreds of meditations. I've never listened to any of them. I've just recorded them and then sent them to people. I'm like, well, if it's got a boo-boo in it, then somebody will let me know. And obviously now with the podcast, if there's an error with the recording, then you will kindly let me know and I'll just record it again. But that's the funny thing about when they don't work. I'm like, Dad, what did I say? And then I think that podcast was never meant to be. Like whatever came through was not meant to be the transmission. That wasn't meant to be shared because it's inaudible. We can't transcribe it. I haven't got a clue what's going on. So I just trust that, right, well, that wasn't the right one and something else will come through.
And it's interesting that you say that you use the podcast for everything else because it's a cornerstone piece and you've got yours sorted, but that is something I do for people is that the only thing they do is the podcast and then I'll get reels from it and written content from it, and because everything flows because you have such a depth in the podcast. You don't have to narrow something down to 30 seconds. And so before we leave the podcasting, can you tell me why you chose to do podcasting?
I don't know why, actually. Maybe 2 years before I started the podcast, there was this like little knock on the inside door of my psyche, like, you should do a podcast, you should do a podcast. And I thought about it and I tried to record a couple in my own way and it just didn't flow at that time. So I just thought, okay, I'm sure it'll come when it's meant to. And then one of my team members actually just said, maybe you'd start a podcast this year. And it just must have been right time, right place for me to receive it. And I was like, yeah, I've got some things to say now. Whereas back then, maybe I didn't think I had anything to say. I used to think that I was an awful speaker because I have my own way of communicating and it's very different from other people. And I have my own language in describing or approaching things. And I've lent into that being like the gift rather than, oh, you need to be like others. This is my voice and this is how I share. And it was just the right moment. So then I just was like, okay, here we are. The podcast has birthed. And then it just all happened. And then I found you and I was like, wonderful. I just Googled podcast VA and you came up and I was like, there she is.
Amazing. It's so obvious for me that you are ideal for a podcast because you have depth to you. So to be able to have that freedom to just go deep, it just really, really suits you. So is there anything you'd like to let our listeners know that you have coming up?
Yeah, so I have birthing really soon a 6-month mentorship and mastermind. So this is for women in life, in relationship, in leadership, in creation, women that really want to go to that next level inside of themselves and then let that manifest and move out into how they show up in their work, in their world, in their service, in their creations. That begins in May and it's a 6-month journey. That's a combination of group calls and individual sessions as well. So this is the ultimate container with me because you get the beauty of both. Often women either come into a group or they come into one-to-one, and there's so much potency in both of those experiences. And I just felt like this year there should be an offering to combine them because we feel and experience so much when we hear other women, but we also gain so much from being just held on our own. So I brought it all together in this space. And for women that want to dive deep into their feminine and their body and their womb, we have the Village, which is a monthly community membership. And we meet there for one live ceremony a month. And you get access to about 7 or 8 of my courses. So hundreds of meditations and practices. Every month there'll be a recorded ceremony or practice. And that is £44 a month. So an absolute beautiful gateway into my world, into all of my work. So they're the 2 things that are open at the moment. The Village is open anytime for women to join. And the Embodied Woman Mastermind and Mentorship, the cart closes on the 11th of May.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Just a huge thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being amazing. And all of your support is deeply appreciated.
Thank you so much.
So, what were your key takeaways from today? Did it raise any questions? What would you like to know more about? Let me know. You can contact me via social media or email. I don't care which way you use, just reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you. And remember, you can get access to lots of free podcast resources that will help you get started or help you improve your podcast at livymusicmedia.com/freebies. Hit subscribe because I want to see you again. But for now, go forth, be the awesome person you are, live the life you want to live, and have fun. You've got this. See you next time.
Show them who I be, unavoidable everywhere you see me. Reach my people, claim my power. There's no hierarchy. It is me and the universe, baby. Rock solid and so ready to reach my people.
Hello
it's Livy here. Have you ever wondered about what the key elements are that make a podcast truly stand out? Or maybe you're thinking about starting your own special podcast and feel a bit overwhelmed and don't know where to start. Well, I have something for you. Introducing the Ultimate Podcast Checklist. Da, 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 da. It's a step-by-step guide that covers everything from the initial brainstorming to advanced growth strategies. It's the perfect companion for both new and seasoned podcasters. And the best part, it's absolutely free. Da, 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 da. To grab your copy, simply head to the show notes of this episode and you will find a direct link there, and then away you go. Remember, every podcast started with that initial spark and the right resource, so let the Ultimate Podcasting Checklist be yours.